You find a single strand of hair on your pillow in the morning. It looks a little thinner, a little weaker than the others. You pick it up, look in the mirror at the slight gap on your scalp, and you think to yourself, my hair loss story just started with the disappearance of this one strand. But you would be wrong. The true beginning of baldness does not happen the moment a hair falls to the floor or washes down the shower drain. The real problem started months, sometimes even years before that, in a dark microscopic space beneath the skin that the human eye can never see. It started on the exact day your hair follicle decided to manufacture a brand new hair that was just a tiny bit smaller than the one before it. And hidden deep within that silent, invisible process is one of the strangest biological paradoxes of the human body. The exact same chemical hormone that can command a man's facial hair to grow into a thick, dark, rugged beard is the very same substance that slowly shrinks the hair on his forehead until it completely vanishes. The same chemical, the same bloodstream. Yet it dictates two entirely opposite destinies on the exact same body. Why does this happen? Why would a healthy strand of hair get progressively weaker year after year? Why does hair usually abandon us at the temples and the crown, but stubbornly stay put at the back of the neck? And if going bald offers no obvious survival advantage in the wild, why did human evolution allow these genetic codes to survive and pass down from generation to generation for hundreds of thousands of years? To decode this mystery, we first have to completely change how we look at the things growing out of our heads. You have to understand, your hair is not a permanent structure. It is not like a tree that sprouts from the ground and just stands there for decades. Hair is a temporary product manufactured over and over again by the same microscopic factory beneath your skin, the hair follicle. Every single follicle on your body operates on its own independent biological clock, cycling through an endless three-stage loop. First comes the growth phase, when the factory is running at full capacity. Cells divide rapidly, pushing the hair shaft outward every single day. This stage can last anywhere from 2 to 6 years, and it is the single factor that determines how long your hair can possibly grow. Next comes a brief transition phase, a short window where the factory shuts down, the bottom of the follicle shrinks, and the structure prepares for rest. Finally, it enters the resting phase. The old hair simply sits dormant in the follicle, waiting to be released. When a new biological cycle kicks off, that old hair falls out to make room for a fresh strand pushing up from beneath, in a healthy scalp. Every time the factory reopens its doors, it produces a new strand of hair that matches the length, thickness, and vigor of the one that just left. But in pattern baldness, the most common form of hair loss in both men and women, this biological clock begins to glitch. You do not wake up one morning with a suddenly bald head. That is an illusion. The reality is that with each new cycle, the growth phase gets clipped just a little bit shorter. The factory beneath the skin doesn't close down overnight. It simply miniaturizes. The first hair grows in thick and strong. When it sheds, the second hair comes back slightly thinner, slightly shorter. By the third cycle, the new strand has lost some of its pigment and cannot reach its former length. Over the course of years, long, robust hairs are systematically replaced by microscopic peach fuzz strands that are so short and so fine, they become practically transparent. That is the biological core of the problem. Your scalp does not look empty because every single hair follicle died or vanished in the dark. It looks empty because millions of microscopic factories have shrunk to the point where the products they manufacture are simply too small to cover the skin anymore. But who or what is issuing the order for these factories to shrink? For decades, popular culture has spread a deeply misleading myth. We are constantly told that men go bald because they have too much testosterone. That a receding hairline is the ultimate badge of overflowing masculinity. But evolutionary biology tells a much more elegant story. Going bald does not require an extraordinary superhuman amount of testosterone floating in your blood. What it actually requires is hair follicles that are extraordinarily sensitive to the signal that hormone sends. Right now, testosterone is continuously circulating through your bloodstream. When it reaches certain tissues, including the scalp, an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase steps in and converts it into a significantly more potent version, dihydrotestosterone, universally known as DHT. DHT is the chemical messenger of change. It seeks out and binds tightly to androgen receptors located inside the dermal papilla, the biological command center, sitting at the very bottom of the hair follicle. In people who carry a specific genetic sensitivity, this binding event triggers a cascade of chemical instructions that orders the follicle to cut its growth phase short and begin the slow process of miniaturization. And this is precisely where the great biological paradox reveals itself. Think about it. When a young boy goes through puberty, this exact same surge of DHT wakes up the dormant follicles on his face. DHT commands the soft peach fuzz on his chin and jaw to transform into a thick, coarse, dark beard. It fuels hair growth on the chest and body. And yet, when that exact same bloodstream carries that exact same DHT up to the top of the scalp, it commands the follicles on the forehead and crown to do the exact opposite, shrink, weaken, and fade away. Why does this bizarre biological double standard exist? Why doesn't a hormone act the same way across the entire body? The answer is simple. A hormone does not carry a universal verbal command like grow or shrink. It is just a chemical key. The meaning of the message depends entirely on the lock on where the receiving cell happens to live. Scientists have discovered that the dermal papilla cells in different regions of your skin are genetically programmed to speak different languages. The follicles in your beard area are hardwired so that when DHT docks into their receptors, they translate the message as accelerate cell division, build a thicker, stronger shaft. But the follicles sitting on your forehead and crown translate that exact same chemical key as danger, shrink the factory cut production time. Your beard and your scalp receive the exact same chemical letter from the body, but they read and interpret that letter in two completely different dialects. And that is why a man with a full lumberjack beard has zero biological guarantee that he will keep the hair on the top of his head. Even across the landscape of your scalp, this territorial divide is breathtakingly precise. Have you ever noticed that even the most severely bald men who have lost every single hair on the top of their heads, almost always retain a thick, horseshoe-shaped ring of hair around the sides and back of their scalp? All of those hairs live on the exact same head. They are fed by the exact same blood vessels, bathed in the exact same daily dose of DHT, and sit just inches apart from one another. Why does the front fall while the back endures? It happens because baldness does not follow a map drawn by your blood. It follows a map drawn by follicle sensitivity. For ancient evolutionary reasons, the follicles on the front and top of the scalp possess a much higher density of DHT receptors and higher levels of the conversion enzyme. They act like hypersensitive antennas, catching the slightest whisper of DHT and initiating self-destruction. Meanwhile, the follicles at the back of the head are practically deaf to the signal. They carry very few receptors, ignore the presence of DHT, and carry on with their normal biological cycles as if nothing is happening at all. This stubborn resilience at the back of the scalp is actually the foundational principle behind modern hair transplantation. When a surgeon extracts hair follicles from the back of the head and implants them onto a bald forehead, something remarkable takes place. Those transplanted hairs do not catch the baldness disease of their new neighborhood. They bring their original built-in DHT resistance with them to the new location, continuing to grow thick terminal hairs for decades. When a resilient follicle is relocated, its genetic armor moves with it. Survival is coded inside the individual factory, not in the soil of the scalp. But whenever we talk about genetics, we immediately crash into another age-old myth. You have almost certainly heard someone say, "If you want to know if you'll go bald, just look at your mother's father." This rumor isn't a complete lie, but it severely oversimplifies a massively complex biological reality. It is true that the primary androgen receptor gene sits on the X chromosome, the chromosome that men inherit exclusively from their mothers, directly linking back to the maternal grandfather. But the X chromosome is just one actor in a massive biological play. Androgenetic alopecia is a polygenic trait. Modern genome-wide studies, looking at tens of thousands of people, have revealed that there are dozens, sometimes nearly 100 different regions across your DNA, that collectively decide the fate of your hairline. The vast majority of these genes sit on autosomes, meaning you inherit them from both your father and your mother. Together, they act like a committee voting on everything from receptor density and enzyme activity to the length of your growth cycles and the exact age your hair starts to thin. Your maternal grandfather might have a seat on that committee, but he does not write the final verdict alone. Because of this intricate randomized genetic shuffle from both sides of the family tree, two full brothers can grow up under the same roof, eat the same diet, and share the same parents. Yet one keeps a thick shock of hair into his 60s, while the other watches his hairline recede before he turns 25. Genetics deals in probabilities, not a crystal-clear photograph of your future scalp. So where does time, our chronological age, fit into all of this? Many people assume that getting older automatically means your hair follicles expire. But age does not issue a command for hair to fall out. Age simply gives your genetics and your hormones the one thing they need to do their work: time. Miniaturization is not a process that happens over a few weeks. It requires the quiet accumulation of dozens of shortened growth cycles under the continuous influence of DHT over many years. A young man might carry every single genetic variant for severe baldness, but the clock needs to tick for those cycles to repeat enough times for the physical change to become visible to the human eye. And at this point, a critical medical truth must be stated clearly. Pattern baldness is not an exclusive boys' club. Women carry these exact same genes, and their bodies produce androgen hormones too, albeit in smaller quantities. However, the architectural blueprint of female hair loss looks entirely different. When a woman experiences pattern thinning, her frontal hairline almost always stays completely intact. Instead, the thinning spreads diffusely across the top and crown of the head. Year after year, her natural part gradually widens, exposing just a little bit more scalp beneath the lights. The biological mechanisms in women are far more intricate and mysterious. Many women experience this gradual follicle miniaturization without showing high levels of androgen hormones in their blood at all. You do not need to be overflowing with male hormones to lose hair. Sometimes a follicle that is simply hypersensitive to normal everyday baseline levels is more than enough to trigger the decline. However, precisely because hair thinning can look so similar on the surface, we have to be extremely careful. Not every hair falling into your sink is the result of pattern baldness. Hair loss is just a visual description of what you see leaving your body, but it tells you nothing about the biological drama unfolding beneath the skin. There are types of hair loss that have absolutely nothing to do with testosterone or miniaturizing factories. Take the phenomenon of severe physiological stress, a condition known as telogen effluvium. When your body undergoes a massive shock, a raging fever, major surgery, rapid weight loss, childbirth, or profound emotional trauma, it instantly switches into survival mode. It makes a ruthless biological calculation growing. Hair is an unnecessary waste of energy. Instantly, it commands up to 30% of your actively growing follicles to shut down and jump straight into the resting phase all at once. But here is the great cognitive trap. You will not see that hair fall out on the day you experience the stress. A hair that enters the resting phase sits anchored in the scalp for 2 to 3 months. Only after that delay, when the body recovers and those follicles wake up to push out new hair, does the old hair shed en masse. You suddenly watch hair falling out in handfuls in the shower in month 4, and your brain frantically searches for what you did wrong yesterday, completely missing the true trigger that happened a season ago. That is why a receding hairline that creeps back over 6 years and a sudden diffuse shedding that appears over 6 weeks might trigger the exact same panic in the mirror, but they belong to entirely different medical universes. There are autoimmune conditions where confused white blood cells attack the follicles in smooth round patches. There are inflammatory conditions that leave behind permanent scar tissue, destroying the factory forever. Confusing these with ordinary genetic baldness and blindly blaming DHT can cause us to miss critical signals our bodies are trying to send. But if we return to our central story, the slow progressive pattern baldness affecting hundreds of millions of people around the globe, a profound evolutionary question emerges, one that demands an answer. Look back at the history of life on Earth. Natural selection is a ruthless editor. It relentlessly purges traits that are wasteful, dangerous, or detrimental to survival. Scalp hair offers an obvious tangible benefit. It acts as a built-in biological shield, protecting our heat-sensitive brains from scorching ultraviolet solar radiation and insulating us against the freezing cold of the night. If losing that shield is a biological disadvantage, and if being bald can sometimes impact social confidence or perceived attractiveness in modern society, why didn't evolution eliminate these genes hundreds of thousands of years ago? Why didn't they vanish? Why are they so wildly common in the human gene pool today? The answer offers a humbling lesson in how nature actually operates. First, you have to remember what natural selection actually cares about your ability to survive long enough to pass on your genes. Evolutionary pressures beat down hardest on traits that affect you before and during your peak reproductive years. Androgenetic alopecia usually doesn't become visually obvious until a man is well into his 20s, 30s, or 40s. A time when throughout most of human evolutionary history, our ancestors had already found mates, reproduced, and successfully passed their DNA down to the next generation. Once a trait expresses itself past the biological finish line of reproduction, natural selection becomes effectively blind to it. Evolution does not work overtime to ensure you have a flowing mane of hair at age 60. It only cares that your genetic code survived to reach the next branch of the family tree. Furthermore, our bodies are not engineered as collections of isolated independent parts. A gene on a strand of DNA rarely does just one single job. The genes that regulate androgen receptor sensitivity on your scalp are almost certainly the exact same genes that help govern the development of the endocrine system, the onset of puberty, or the function of vital reproductive organs. It is entirely possible that losing a bit of hair on the crown of your head is simply a minor, harmless biological side effect of possessing a robust, multifunctional hormone system that was essential for keeping your ancestors alive and fertile. Evolution is more than willing to accept a bald patch on top if it means preserving a vital communication network everywhere else. An organism does not need to be biologically perfect to endure. A physical trait does not need to grant you a superpower to survive the filter of time. Sometimes a trait exists today simply because it was never deadly enough to kill off the people carrying it. Going bald is probably not some grand evolutionary master plan designed to signal wisdom or dominance to the tribe. It is here simply because evolution is a pragmatic bargainer. It doesn't fix what doesn't stop the machine from running. And yet, there is a massive gulf between the cold pragmatism of evolution and the lived emotional experience of a modern human being. To a biological researcher, a hair follicle is just a few millimeters of specialized tissue. But to the human psyche, hair is an enormous pillar of personal identity. It is the natural crown sitting at the apex of the body, framing your face in the mirror every single morning. It is deeply entwined with our perceptions of youth, vigor, gender, and how we wish to be presented to the world. When those strands slowly begin to vanish, Even if you know medically that your body is completely healthy and in no physical danger, the sense of loss is profound and entirely valid. It feels like a slow erosion of personal control, a visual reminder of time taking away something familiar without our permission. And it is precisely that feeling of helplessness that drives us into a modern cognitive trap. We start hunting for a single villain and a single instant cure. We blame our shampoo. We blame washing our hair with water that was too hot. We blame wearing a baseball cap every day. We buy expensive bottles of miracle oils and specialized shampoos, promising to resurrect dead follicles. But remember the biological reality we just mapped out. The hair you can touch with your fingers, the hair you see washing down the drain, is already dead tissue. A shampoo can clean the surface of the scalp. It can temporarily swell a hair shaft to make it look slightly thicker. But a shampoo cannot seep millimeters deep beneath the skin. Unlock the command center of the dermal papilla, rewrite your autosomal DNA. Or tell your receptors to ignore DHT. Trying to cure pattern baldness with surface products is like trying to change the architectural foundation of a skyscraper by washing the windows on the top floor. The battle for the next hair is fought deep underground, where surface treatments simply cannot reach. So when we step back and look at the whole picture, what should we call pattern baldness? Is it a biological defect? A design flaw in the human machine? A disease that needs to be eradicated? Perhaps the most accurate and peaceful way to view it is as a natural outcome of an immensely complex biological heritage. Your hair is the intersection of thousands of years of evolutionary trade-offs, of randomized genetic lotteries handed down from countless ancestors, and of a dynamic hormonal system that has kept our species alive through freezing ice ages and scorching savannas. When a follicle slowly miniaturizes your body, is not betraying you. It is simply executing instructions written in an ancient biological dialect, one that evolution permitted to survive, because it never stopped your ancestors from loving, thriving, and creating you. The mystery of human hair is a quiet reminder of how much unseen complexity is woven into the most ordinary parts of our daily lives. A falling hair isn't just disappearing. It is telling a microscopic story about hormones, inheritance, and the strange pragmatism of nature. If you enjoy looking beneath the surface of everyday human behaviors, to uncover the ancient evolutionary puzzles still running inside our modern bodies, keep exploring with Cave Curious. Because sometimes the things that seem to be vanishing from our lives are really just starting over in a much smaller way. We'll see you around the campfire for our next journey into the strange, uncharted corners of the human machine.